Hey Cosmonaut! Today we are going to be exploring what Reddit ask. What's the most terrifying "we need to leave now" moment you've ever experienced? Answer 1. I was 8, at a restaurant with my cousins, mom, and aunt, also the same age as us kids at the time, 8 to 12. We were celebrating birthdays. This was a hole-in-the-wall restaurant. 2 guys came in acting suspicious. They kept looking over at our table. We were the only ones there other than the 2 people working. One kept feeling around his pocket. The one guy was very nervous. He went outside and threw up. After a little while, his partner went out and seemed to be trying to talk him into going back in, but he wouldn't. The partner came back in by himself for a while, but eventually left without ordering anything. My mom was on alert and was telling us 4 kids to get up now and leave, which is what I think prompted the guys to leave. I knew as a kid something was very wrong. As an adult, I 100% believe it was a planned armed robbery. But the one guy had second thoughts seeing a mom with 4 cute little girls there. If they're out there, thanks for not traumatizing us. This was 30+ years ago. Answer 2. I absent-mindedly got on an empty subway car and realized at the doors closed that it was empty. B. Everyone in the next car was pressed up against the window, watching me. And C. The overwhelming smell of shit that I had just chalked up to summer in NYC was coming from a naked man at the other end of the car, who had covered himself and most of the seat, floor, and window near him with shit. He seemed to be squaring up. I turned and tried the door between the cars, but it was locked. The people staring at me tried theirs. Also locked. They gave me sympathetic looks. As the train started moving, dude slipped and fell with a wet thud, and he howled. I was unfucking comfortable. Answer 3. I was in Curitiba, Brazil, at a communist-themed bar called Fidel. The bartender was wearing a Che Guevara hat and sort of had that look. I was with like 4 other Americans. After a while, the bar emptied out. We were the only ones in there aside from the bartender. Suddenly, the bartender went over to the door, locked it, and closed a metal shutter over it. So we were trapped inside. He looked at us and pointed to a stairwell and said, "Upstairs now." We were all freaked out but figured better do what he says because he seemed serious. We went upstairs to this small room with chairs and a coffee table thinking he was going to rob us or kill us or something, and I was looking for a window or some way to get out. We wait there in tense silence for a few minutes. Then he comes upstairs with a huge bong, explains he closed the shutter because one of the customers in the bar previously had harassed tourists and had pulled a knife on someone the other day and tends to linger around drunk outside the bar. He suggested we wait upstairs for 30 minutes or so, until the guy had stumbled home. Then he smoked us out on his huge bong, and we had a laugh before going back to the hostel. Answer 4. Wasn't so much as we, but me. I was early elementary waiting for the school bus in my driveway. I lived in the country, so they picked you up at your house, and I always waited halfway down my long driveway until I saw the bus crest the top of the hill. While I was waiting, that classic pedo, windowless, unmarked, utility van pulls into the bottom of my driveway. A man pops his head out the window and waves at me and says he lost and needs directions. I instantly get that bad feeling about the guy and start slowly backing up my driveway, shaking my head no at him. He says he can't hear me and asks me to come closer. I refused and kept backing up the driveway. My mom saw this from the kitchen window and came out to see what was going on, and he backed out and left. Not long after that, a girl was grabbed by a man in a van that matched the description of the one that stopped in my driveway. Thankfully, she wiggled out of her backpack and got away, but I don't think they ever found the guy. Answer 5. Not a leave now moment, but a think quick moment for sure. I lived in a small condo, gated, in Santa Monica in the 90s. I was in my room, back bedroom, folding clothes and heard a knock that sounded like it was at my neighbor's. Another knock, then I felt like I needed to go check. I walked into the living room just as my front door was opening and a young man was stepping into my place. My reaction wasn't fear, it was anger. I screamed, "Who the F are you and what the F are you doing here?" He mumbled something about being a college student, and I moved towards him and told him to get the F out. He ran away. The West Side rapist was on the loose back then, and it wasn't until after that I thought about that. I called the police and reported it. Turns out that's who came to my door. He was captured shortly after that. That was a lesson I'll never forget. Fight back. I was prepared to take him on physically if he hadn't left. Answer 6. In Edinburgh years ago, I was sitting in a bus stop. It had, I guess, plexiglass or some kind of reinforced clear stuff at my back, so between me and the street. I was sitting with my back to the street and suddenly had the calm, quiet thought that it might be good to move to the other end of the bus stop. Only a few minutes after that, I look up and see, as if in slow motion, the horrified expressions of people on the pavement who are facing behind me. Then I hear a crash, and the most unearthly screaming sound as a car drives, fully accelerating, through the bus stop where I'd just been sitting, just mowed that half of it down and drove straight through the plate glass window of the real estate agent on the other side. The unearthly screaming was the metal post of the bus stop bending and finally snapping. The crash was the clear glass stuff smashing. It was some poor old fella who'd got confused in traffic and hit the accelerator instead of the brake and turned the car 45 degrees to miss cars in front of him. He really was accelerating the whole time. I saw him. He was in absolute shock. I hung around in case the police wanted me to say what happened, and people somehow got hold of the old fella's adult son. I was really shocked myself and in a bit of a state for the rest of the day. And I still wonder about that quiet voice inside me telling me to move. Hey you, if you're enjoying the video, subscribe for more histories. Answer 7. I was in a store with a friend. I was looking at the aisle with my back towards most of the store. I felt a presence coming up behind me, so I turned around really fast. I met with a guy right up in my face, crouched a little, his hand stretched towards my waist. He either tried to grab my ass or he tried to grab my wallet. But when I turned around, we locked eyes. He quickly went to another aisle, and I stood there for a second wondering what almost happened. When I looked up again, he was staring straight at me from across the store, with just his eyes, eyebrows, and forehead visible from over the aisle shelves. It was the scariest look. His eyes looked enraged. My friend didn't notice that anything happened, but when I saw him glaring at me like that, I told her immediately, "We need to go." She didn't ask questions and we left. I didn't report it, but I wish I would have. I was scared and just wanted to leave. Another time I was walking down the street and I saw a guy started following me. I tried to take a different route home until he stopped, but he followed me across 3 streets and into an apartment complex. I got lost inside the apartment complex. I somehow ended up in a fenced courtyard that I couldn't find the way out of, and he was still following me. I had to climb up an embankment to get out. I could not wait to get home. Also, I unknowingly got in the car of a driver who was on coke and extremely agitated. You can guess how that ride went. Okay, last one, I promise. I was very young, maybe 7 or 8. I was playing outside in my cul-de-sac with some neighbor kids around the same age as me. All of us were girls. This huge maroon van pulls into the cul-de-sac with the window rolled down. He pulls up slowly to where my friends and I were playing on the sidewalk. He tells me, "I need to go to the hospital. Do you know where it is at? Can you take me to the hospital?" I told him I didn't know where it was. We all ran inside right after. Answer 8. My mom and I were in Dubai in the middle of the night. This guy on a corner stopped my mom and started trying to sell her a purse for cheap. I don't know why she agreed. To be polite, he said to follow him and led us through dark, deserted alley after dark, deserted alley. The whole time 15 degrees Fahrenheit at the time, was tugging on my mom's sleeve telling her, "We need to go, we need to go. Stop following him. This is creepy." I wasn't about to leave my mom. But in hindsight, if I had, she probably would have followed me. But she was saying it would be rude to leave. Finally, he led us to the back entrance of an unmarked building and started up the dimly lit stairs, and I absolutely refused to let go of my mom's arm or let her take another step. Thank God her common sense finally kicked in, and from outside she said, "No thank you," and we fast walked the fuck out of there. And to think this woman was a refugee, how she survived all those years, I'll never know. Answer 9. Was in a busy public square in France, and a car drove by, slowed down, and someone threw something out of the window that landed with a metallic plink sound about 20 feet from me. Lady sitting on a bench next to where it landed jumped when she saw it. It was a small propane cylinder, wrapped in duct tape. I picked up my kid and ran. It didn't blow up, and police who arrived a few minutes later didn't make a big fuss, but it sure as hell looked like an IED to me. Answer 10. When I was young, I was in a school shooting. It was announced over the intercom that there was an active threat in the school, but for a reason I can't remember, my teacher at the time thought it was just a drill. So we remained in our seats and continued working on our assignments. I remember just starting down at the page unable to move, and I just knew it wasn't just a drill. There weren't any sounds of shots fired yet, or screams, but my body was reacting with such fear that I knew. By the time that my teacher eventually realized it wasn't a drill, I was already debating on running out the classroom door since we were very close to the school's entrance, where I could have gotten out. Obviously that wasn't the best idea, and I didn't do it, but the gut feeling I had in that moment was crazy. Hey you, subscribe for more histories. Answer 11. It was 1 a.m. and I was just about to get out of work. I was alone and closing that night. Right about the last hour before closing, I suddenly got the feeling like I was being watched. The hair on the back of my neck and arms stood up and my heart and breathing suddenly increased. I kept telling myself it's okay, remain calm. I turned on all the lights outside the building, but couldn't see anything out of the norm. Something kept telling me, "Get out! Leave now! Hurry!" So I called a friend, told them what was happening, and gave them my location and told them to call 911 if something happens to me. I've only felt that feeling one other time in my life. It was when I was almost abducted in a grocery store parking lot as a kid. It's the feeling of being hunted, like prey. Your instincts kick in and it's like GTFO. Answer 12. When I was 11, we were at the beach, and the day was good but not exactly sunny. There was a rain forecast, but only for later in the day. Far away in the horizon, I saw a black line in the sky. I counted a few minutes and looked again. The black line was now a thick black bar. Couple minutes later, it was the darkest storm cloud I've ever seen. I went to my parents and said the "we need to leave now" line, and pointed at the cloud. Right when I pointed, we could see the flashes of lightning in the black cloud. We barely had time to drive and stop under a bridge when the town was hit with, according to the radio, 80-mile-per-hour winds and hail the size of eggs. Storm didn't last 10 minutes and the sun was back. I felt bad for the people at the beach. The hospital was so packed with people in need of first aid for cuts and bruises that they installed a tent in front of the hospital for the smaller injuries. Answer 13. Got a heavy hitter for this one. Managed to find myself sat in the front carriage for a 60-mile-per-hour train crash, which is about as fun as it sounds. After derailing, we came to rest on our side in a tunnel, can't see a thing, dizzy, ears ringing. You check your limbs are still in the right places and start trying to grasp what just happened. But you realize smoke has started filling the carriage. Doors obviously didn't open. Couldn't kick the windows out. Cue panic like you can't imagine. Grown men losing their shit. Hysteria. Absolute bedlam. Half the passengers were strewn around the carriage. Half were climbing over each other trying to get out. Figured that was me done. Once I realized our goose was cooked, I called the missus to say the train had crashed. There was a fire. I don't think I'm getting out and that I love her. The fire never really caught. We just stood huddled in the wreck trying to keep each other talking until rescue came. Wound up with a severe PTSD diagnosis. Stopped going outside. Could never feel safe. Couldn't sleep for more than a couple of hours at a time, so just completely stopped functioning for a year. And then another year of gradually improving. Was self-employed at the time, so nearly lost everything in the process. It's been a handful of years now, and it still fucks with my head on a daily basis, albeit in largely manageable ways. Life is good now, and somehow nobody died, so no dramas. Hell of a night, though. Answer 14. I was living in Europe and was walking down the street at night. Not very late, maybe 8 p.m., with my boyfriend at the time. He was talking rather loudly and clearly in American English. A guy walking down the street ahead, perpendicular to us, looked over at us and kept eyeing us. He had something baton-like in hand and was swinging it around by his side a bit. I quietly told my BF to shut up, but of course he still loudly asked why. I said that guy is giving me seriously bad vibes and he brushed me off. We turned down the same street that guy was walking on because my boyfriend insisted on picking up some food, and it was the only street with restaurants still open. I made us walk on the far side of the street. Sure enough, that guy had stopped and was waiting in the shadows. When he saw us, he started following us. We went into the restaurant, and he followed us in there too and went and sat at a table without ordering. By then, my boyfriend believed me, but insisted on still getting his food. I could see at that time the guy was carrying an umbrella, but the way he was holding it suggested he intended to not use it for rain. It wasn't raining that evening even. We got my BF's food to go and left. And of course, that guy followed us. Luckily, a large group of people came out of a bar club a couple doors down. So I grabbed my BF's hand and wormed us in the middle of them, and then dashed down a small cut-through street, and we ran to get around the curve so we couldn't be seen. Thankfully, we lost the guy at that point, but I have no doubt we were very close to getting jumped, beaten, and robbed. And I've since dropped the dead weight that X was. Answer 15. 3 years ago, my daughter 25 and I 52 were at a very large suburban mall outside of Philadelphia. It was about 2 p.m. on a Sunday afternoon, and we were shopping at a DSW shoe store, which you can exit the mall from. Walking back to our car, my daughter spotted a set of keys on the ground in the parking lot. They were just 2 keys together, no other kind of keychain on them. As we looked around, I noticed that a beat-up-looking red van was parked directly next to my car. The van had backed into the parking space so that the van's driver's side door was up against my driver's side door. The van's driver's side door was open, and there was a very sketchy-looking man who appeared to be searching for something in his van. I immediately got a bad feeling about the whole situation. But since it was daylight and there were other people around, my daughter and I kind of hung back and waited for this guy to get in his car and drive away. Not surprisingly, he kept looking for something in his van. So we then went and stood at the entrance to the mall so that we could continue to keep an eye on him, but from a safer distance. Another 5 or so minutes goes by, and the guy still is not moving, nor has he shut his door. I absolutely had the feeling that had I tried to get into my car, he would have grabbed one of us and tried to get us into his van. After another few minutes, we went back into the store and grabbed a security guard who followed us out to the parking lot. We handed her the keys that we'd found and followed her from a safe distance as she approached the man and asked him what he was doing. Not surprisingly, he said he was looking for his keys, and miraculously, they were the keys that she had in her hand. She handed them back, and he quickly took off. Trust me when I tell you that I'm always skeptical of the urban legend type stories of my best friend's sister's mailman's brother's wife went to the gas station and the attendant flagged her down to tell her that there was an axe murder in the back seat. But I assure you that this happened to me. There were a few things that really drove it home that this guy was almost certainly up to no good. First, he was parked in the parking lot of the DSW, which not only is a store that is primarily frequented by women, but also is located in a parking lot that has an almost direct route to a major highway. This is a huge mall, and this exit is probably the quickest way to get on a major highway or the Pennsylvania Turnpike. Also, my car at the time was probably easily pegged as the car of a female. It was a white Jeep Cherokee. Plus, I had things in the back seat and back of the car that could easily identify it as a woman's car. A woman's jacket, shopping bag from Ann Taylor. Lastly, we hadn't been in the store more than 20 minutes or so, and the van wasn't parked next to us when we arrived. The likelihood that someone parked there, went into the mall, finished their shopping, and got back to their car to realize that they couldn't find their keys in that short amount of time isn't very likely. It could all be very coincidental, and perhaps this guy is just an honest person who dropped his keys. But the whole thing felt so off, and I am convinced that my daughter and I escaped harm that day by listening to our instincts. Answer 16. This was in India in 2006. There was this track where me and my friends would go running in the evening. There was a big patch of grass that grew in the middle of the track, where herders would generally be grazing their buffaloes. One evening, me and my friend were jogging as usual, and suddenly one of the buffaloes raised its forelegs and charged towards. Behind her, 4 to 5 more followed. I've never run faster in my life out the gate and inside the small storeroom that was next to it. The herdsman later told us that the buffaloes didn't follow us at all. They just scared us a bit and then never even reached the track. I had nightmares about being trapped in narrow alleys with buffaloes charging at me from both ends for months after that.
That was enough for today, Cosmonaut. I'll wait for you in the next travel.